Hello, Steve White, Steve White's 89. Well, I am a huge Titanic fan. Ever since I was a little kid, I think I saw the film SOS Titanic, which was a TV movie that was made in the late 70s. I've been a bit obsessed with it. And of course, James Cameron's film and the millions of documentaries that have come out since then, I've been able to indulge that obsession my whole life. But I just saw a documentary tonight, which I thought was new but wasn't new. It actually came out in 2017. It's called Titanic, the New Evidence. And yes, so I know this is not news, but it was news to me to an extent. Basically, the documentary sort of began with a photo album that was found in somebody's attic. Someone who worked, I think one of the electricians who worked on the Titanic, he documented quite a lot of the Titanic's being built. He had the hull being launched and all this sort of stuff. And there was a picture that people found interesting. There was a picture where there appeared to be a dark patch on the side of the ship, basically where it eventually collided with the iceberg. And there was some speculation as to what that was. So that sort of started the thinking. Now we all know, we don't all know, apparently it's not that widely known, but there was a fire in the coal storage compartments on the Titanic. Now, I think it was sort of understood that it happened while the Titanic was travelling, but apparently it supposedly started weeks before that, when the coal was first loaded onto the ship, and it wasn't found or discovered for a while. So it was a bigger problem than, basically it was a bigger problem than what was widely known by the public, because it seems like the officials knew. Now, they didn't tell anyone on the ship that there was a fire on the ship, because quite a lot of those people probably wouldn't have gotten on the ship, because when you hear there's a fire on the ship, you don't think that's something you can just travel and have that just, happening down below and no one notices or worries and it's not a problem. It does sound quite surreal, but apparently these sort of fires do happen. But because Titanic had because it was such a huge ship, it had such a huge storage compartments for the coal, it was more of a problem than, I guess, in other ships where they would have put it out easier. So the main sort of suggestion is that the fire did two things. It weakened the metal on the outside of the ship, the hull where the ship actually hit the iceberg, and made it more brittle. And it also, the fire was up against one of the watertight bulkheads. So, and there were reports of it actually warping it. They could see that it was red hot, it was glowing, and it was warped. And at some point, because the Titanic was holding itself up for a while, it didn't drop a bit because the front compartments had filled with water, but they were, the watertight bulkheads were holding the water in. But then one of them burst. And the belief was always, and I'd always sort of heard, that the ship could stay afloat with one or two compartments full, but with three or four, it was too much, and it dipped enough that the water flowed over the top of the watertight compartments. But what some eyewitness reports apparently say is that it actually burst down below, further down, where the watertight bulkheads had been warped by the burning coal. So that's a little bit of a twist, because I'd never heard that before, and apparently this was known. And when they were doing the American investigation, because I think there were investigations on both continents regarding it, and they really just brushed over it. They didn't interview the firemen who were involved. The implication was that all the firemen had died. That's not true. There were 12 people who were directly there trying to put it out, and then there were other people who, I'm not sure how they were involved, but there were apparently 57 people who weren't called, could have been called. So it looked like they were determined to suggest it was just a matter of speeding towards icebergs. That was the problem. And the idea that they were speeding towards the icebergs was because they were trying to beat a new record to get into New York before they were expected. When it suggested that the reason why they were going so fast was because they couldn't put the coal out, so they had to just shovel the coal into the engines, so they were heading faster than they should have been. And because there was a coal shortage, because there was a labour issues, the idea of slowing down for the icebergs would have meant using more coal to speed up again later. So they thought it'd be less of a problem to speed through iceberg fields than it would be to stop and start and maybe run out of coal, and have the embarrassment of running out of coal before it got to New York. So there was some level of ego involved, but it was a slightly different issue. It wasn't the idea of wanting to get there early and fast and, arrive early and surprise people. They actually just were afraid they weren't going to make it. So that's another twist. And there was another little thing we found out about Mr. I think Mr. Ismay, was that the guy who actually, the original designer or owner, I can't remember which one he was, but he was the one who supposedly dressed up like a woman and got off the ship. He was one of the few men who got off the ship alive. He sent a telegram immediately, and he wanted the crew, the firemen and the crew that were involved in the fire, sent back to England right away, presumably so they couldn't be interviewed and couldn't talk. So that looks very suspicious. Now, the documentary was done for... who was it? No, it wasn't the History Channel. Just reading this. There was an article which had the 9 jaw-dropping claims in Titanic, the new evidence, from Entertainment Weekly, which was done in 2017. Yes, I know how far behind I am. So they talk about the mark on the side of the ship. The fire may have been there weeks below. The fire was never put out. I think also the assumption was the fire was eventually put out, that there was a fire, but it was put out. It was never put out. It was raging all the way through, and that did appear to be why they were using coal the way they were and why they didn't slow down. So that's something that wasn't widely known. And of course the position of the fire caused damage to the bulkheads. And allegedly aware of the fire, the owners of the Titanic forged on regardless, so they knew, but they didn't stop. They weren't picking up the pace to break records, but because how they were using the coal. I've been over most of this. And even if they couldn't have slowed down, they might not have chosen to because they were afraid of running out of coal. And the fire played a deadly role in the final hours, of course, because that was when the fire caused the metal. Apparently it lost, it was 4% of its strength, and it was brittle as well because they apparently had not used the best steel. So it was damaged through the fire and it was brittle, and the water pushing on it, and probably the difference between the temperatures on the outside and the inside between the fire and the water, the two things, it all just came together. And the chairman of White Star allegedly took preemptive action to cover the truth, and that was indeed Mr. Ismay, who sent a code, Yamsi, which is his name backwards, in a telegraph, and also asked that all the firemen that were sent back to England as quickly as possible. So, yeah, Lord Mersey, 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 was a commissioner in the British Inquiry and a patron of the Shipbuilder's Guide. He was the one who didn't bother to call on the 57 firemen and really didn't explore the issue of the fire at all, and kind of ignored it. And the assumption was just that it was a matter of arrogance. They just pushed on through this ice field when they shouldn't have, when it really was more complicated than that, which is interesting. I just really want to know. The Smithsonian Channel, that's where it's from. So yes, so the 2017 documentary from the Smithsonian Channel, Titanic, the New Evidence, was very interesting. Glad I watched it, glad I caught it. Because I recently lost half my TV channels. There's something wrong, I think, with the antenna. And I was watching SBS because I only have SBS and Channel 9 now. It's like when I was a kid, we only had 2 channels. We had ABC and one commercial channel in Tasmania when I was growing up. It's a bit of a time warp at the moment. Everything's a time warp at the moment. It's all about the 80s and the 90s. And yeah, it's kind of weird. and I was watching SBS and I just caught an ad for this and I thought, oh, that looks really good. I didn't realise it wasn't a new documentary. This may be the first time they screened it on SBS, but it's not a new documentary. So this is all out there. But the other thing is, it was always out there. It was in the investigation at the time. It was just ignored. And somehow all the researchers, a lot of the researchers didn't pick up on it or pull it out and sort of explore it. It was something I'd heard about, the fire, and that might have caused problems with the bulkheads and so forth. Not with the bulkheads, with the actual hull. But it was always dismissed as being, not really that important to the situation. And it looks like it really was of great importance and part of the reason that the ship actually sunk. If it hadn't been for the fire, the bulkheads would have held and they would have been rescued by the Carpathia. So, yeah, hardly inconsequential. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.